Chosen one. Many people have looked at you and felt confused by what they see. Life has not been gentle with you, yet the marks that hardship usually leaves on a person's face seem strangely absent. While others expected time, pressure, and disappointment to weigh you down, you still carry a quiet lightness, a calm presence, and a youthful spirit that many struggle to explain. Some have even mistaken it for innocence or weakness. But heaven reveals a deeper truth. What they see is not superficial youth, but preservation. God has guarded your spirit through trials, renewing your strength from within. What others misread as softness is actually evidence of resilience, healing, and divine favor that refuse to let bitterness define your story. Chosen one. Many people have wondered why you seem to carry a youthful presence that does not match the intensity of the life you have lived. They look at your face, your calm demeanor, the quiet steadiness in your voice, and they assume it must come from an easy story or a sheltered path. They imagine that someone who appears so light cannot possibly understand the deeper shadows of life. Yet heaven reveals that what they are seeing is not the product of innocence, but the result of inner peace that was carefully built through years of spiritual endurance. Your appearance reflects the condition of a spirit that refused to let bitterness become its permanent language. In a world that constantly feeds on anxiety, comparison, resentment, and emotional chaos, most people slowly absorb the weight of those forces without realizing it. Over time, that weight begins to shape their expressions, their posture, and even the way their presence feels to others. Stress becomes etched into the face, unresolved anger tightens the voice, and unhealed disappointment quietly hardens the heart. Many people carry these invisible burdens for so long that they begin to believe such heaviness is simply a normal part of adulthood. Yet your journey unfolded differently, because God taught you a discipline that many never learn. The discipline of releasing what was never meant to stay. Chosen one. There were moments in your life when the pressure around you could have easily turned into permanent bitterness. You faced misunderstandings that cut deeper than words, betrayals that shook your trust, and seasons of uncertainty where the future seemed clouded with doubt. Those experiences had the power to change you in ways that might have left visible marks on your spirit. Yet instead of allowing pain to settle inside you, you slowly learned how to place those wounds into the hands of God. Through prayer, reflection, and quiet surrender, you discovered that holding on to resentment only changed your future to the past. The peace you carry now is the result of those difficult choices. Moments when you released anger before it could become identity. This process did not happen quickly or easily. There were nights when the temptation to replay every hurt felt overwhelming, and there were days when the urge to defend yourself or retaliate seemed justified. Yet in those moments you made a different decision. Instead of reacting immediately to every emotional storm, you learned to pause, breathe, and bring your thoughts before God. Philippians 4:7 speaks of the peace of God that surpasses all understanding, a peace capable of guarding the heart and mind. That peace did not arrive because your life lacked conflict. It arrived because you invited God into the conflict rather than letting it define you. Over time, that spiritual practice became part of who you are. Because of this inner peace, your spirit developed a lightness that others could see, even if they did not understand it. When people encountered you, they sensed calm rather than tension. Your presence did not carry the same emotional turbulence they were accustomed to encountering in others. Instead of reacting quickly with anger or defensiveness, you responded with steadiness and clarity. To some observers, that calmness appeared almost unusual. They interpreted it through the only explanation they knew, assuming that someone so composed must simply lack experience with hardship. In their minds, calmness could only exist where struggle had not yet arrived. Chosen one. This misunderstanding created the illusion that you were naive or unaware of the darker aspects of life. Because your demeanor remained gentle, some people believed you could be easily manipulated or misled. They assumed that someone who appeared soft could not possibly recognize hidden motives or subtle deception. What they failed to realize was that your peace had not grown from ignorance, but from survival. The calmness they misread was not emptiness, but strength, formed in the quiet battles where you chose wisdom over impulse and prayer over reaction. Over time, that peace became a kind of armor around your life. It protected your spirit from the emotional storms that often consume others. When tension filled a room, you did not absorb it in the same way, because your foundation rested somewhere deeper than the circumstances around you. Proverbs 16:32 reminds us that a person who rules their spirit is stronger than one who conquers a city. This verse reveals that the greatest form of strength is not loud or aggressive. It is the quiet mastery of one's own reactions. Chosen one, the peace people see in you is the result of that mastery, developed through years of learning how to guard your heart. Your armor was not forged in comfort, but in moments of endurance. There were times when speaking less protected you more than explaining everything. There were seasons when stepping back preserved your peace better than constant engagement. In those experiences, God showed you that emotional discipline is a form of spiritual authority. Instead of letting every conflict pull you into chaos, you learned to remain anchored in a deeper place of trust. That discipline gradually reshaped your spirit until calmness became your natural posture rather than something you struggled to maintain. Chosen one, this inner peace also renewed your strength in ways that became visible externally. When someone lives under constant stress, their body and mind reflect that pressure over time. Sleeplessness, anxiety, and unresolved anger slowly drain energy and vitality. Yet when a person learns to release those burdens through faith and spiritual discipline, the result is often a noticeable lightness in their expression and presence. Psalm 34:5 says that those who look to the Lord are radiant, and their faces are never covered with shame. This radiance is not cosmetic or artificial. It is the outward reflection of a soul that has learned where its true security lies. Because others did not understand the path that produced this peace, they underestimated the depth behind it. They saw a youthful appearance and assumed it meant you had been protected from life's harsher realities. In truth, the opposite was often the case. Your peace came from walking through those realities without letting them transform your character into something bitter or hardened. You learned to survive disappointment without allowing it to poison your spirit. You endured seasons of loneliness without allowing them to close your heart. Those victories may have been invisible to outsiders, but they shaped the presence you carry today. Chosen one, what others once misread as softness has quietly become your greatest strength. The calmness they underestimated now gives you clarity when others react impulsively. The peace they dismissed now allows you to see situations with discernment rather than emotion. And the youthful spirit they questioned has become evidence of a life sustained by something deeper than circumstances. What they assumed was innocence was actually resilience, the kind that can only grow in a heart that learned how to choose God over reaction again and again. Your youthful appearance, therefore, is not simply a matter of physical features. It is the visible reflection of the inner world you cultivated through faith, discipline, and healing. It tells the story of someone who faced the same storms as everyone else, but refused to carry those storms forever. The peace that rests on your life today is the fruit of that journey, a quiet testimony that the spirit can remain light even after walking through heavy seasons. Chosen one, another reason your presence has remained youthful is because at a certain point in your journey, you quietly stepped away from the exhausting theater of worldly drama. While many people spend enormous emotional energy trying to navigate gossip, competition, social pressure, and the constant need to prove their worth to others, you gradually learned that such environments drain the spirit far more than they nourish it. This realization did not happen overnight. It developed through repeated experiences where you observed how much anxiety and confusion grew from conversations that revolved around comparison, reputation, and the endless analysis of other people's lives. Over time, you began recognizing that the culture of gossip and rivalry demanded constant participation in emotional conflict that had nothing to do with your purpose. Choosing to step back from those spaces was not withdrawal from life. It was protection of the peace God had been cultivating within you. Many individuals remain entangled in those dynamics because they believe staying involved is necessary for connection or acceptance. Social environments often reward those who participate in drama because such behavior creates temporary attention and belonging. Yet the cost of that attention is subtle but significant. When a person becomes accustomed to discussing others' failures, competing for recognition, or defending their reputation in every conversation, their spirit gradually absorbs the tension of those interactions. Stress accumulates quietly, and the mind becomes preoccupied with maintaining an image rather than nurturing inner clarity. Chosen one, you recognized this pattern and chose a different path. Instead of feeding the cycle of gossip and comparison, you allowed God to teach you the discipline of stepping away. This decision created a form of detachment that many people misunderstood. They assumed your distance meant indifference or aloofness, when in truth it was simply wisdom. You realized that not every conversation deserved your participation, and not every opinion required your response. Proverbs 17:27 reminds us that the person who restrains their words possesses knowledge, suggesting that true maturity often reveals itself through quiet discernment rather than constant engagement. By limiting your involvement in chaotic exchanges, you preserved a kind of emotional clarity that others unknowingly surrendered to the noise of their environments. Chosen one, this detachment also freed you from the exhausting habit of trying to prove yourself to shallow expectations. In many social spaces, there exists an unspoken pressure to constantly demonstrate success, intelligence, influence, or relevance. People feel compelled to present a version of themselves that satisfies the approval of those watching. Social comparison becomes a quiet competition where individuals measure their value by how others perceive their achievements or appearance. Living within that framework can quietly exhaust the spirit because the standard for approval constantly changes. No matter how much effort someone invests, the need to maintain that image never truly ends. When you stepped away from that pattern, something remarkable happened. Your spirit became lighter because it was no longer carrying the burden of constant performance. Instead of waking each day, wondering how to present yourself to the world, you were free to focus on living authentically before God. Galatians 1:10 asks a powerful question about whether we are seeking the approval of people or of God, reminding believers that the pursuit of human approval can easily replace the pursuit of divine purpose. Chosen one, your decision to release the need for constant validation allowed your life to settle into a rhythm that many people rarely experience. This freedom also had a visible effect on your presence. When someone is not constantly defending their identity or competing for recognition, their energy remains steady and calm. Their expressions soften because they are not bracing for criticism or comparison. Their mind remains clear because it is not occupied with analyzing how others perceive them. Over time, this internal freedom shapes the way a person appears to the world. Their countenance becomes unburdened, reflecting the peace that grows when someone is no longer trying to prove their value in every room they enter. Psalm 37:7 encourages believers to rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him, a reminder that peace often emerges when we release the pressure to force outcomes through constant effort. People who remain trapped in comparison often struggle to understand this way of living. From their perspective, success must always be pursued through visible striving. They assume that confidence must be constantly displayed, and that influence must be carefully managed through appearances and reputation. When they encounter someone who does not participate in that cycle, yet still carries a vibrant presence, it challenges their assumptions. They begin wondering how someone can appear so steady without engaging in the same relentless pursuit of attention and approval that dominates their own lives. Chosen one, this difference often led others to misinterpret your strength. Because you did not compete loudly or advertise your accomplishments, some assumed you lacked ambition or awareness. Because you did not involve yourself in gossip or rivalry, others believed you were disconnected from reality. Yet the truth was far different. Your calm presence came from understanding that real growth does not require constant public validation. you recognize that energy invested in comparison rarely produces meaningful progress. Instead of feeding that cycle, you directed your attention toward personal growth, spiritual alignment, and purposeful living. This approach gave your life a quality that many people could sense, even if they could not fully explain it. Your presence carried a quiet vibrancy because it was not weighed down by the emotional residue of endless drama. Your energy remained clean because you were not absorbing every conflict or rumor circulating around you. When others walked away from conversations feeling drained, you often remained steady because your involvement had been intentional rather than reactive. This difference created a kind of beauty that was not dependent on appearance or performance. Chosen one, the beauty you carry now is rooted in peace rather than presentation. It emerges naturally from the life you chose to cultivate, one where your worth is not measured by public recognition, but by alignment with God's direction. Isaiah 26:3 promises that God keeps in perfect peace those whose minds remain focused on Him. That peace becomes visible in ways that go beyond words. It appears in the calm confidence with which you approach challenges, the patience you display in uncertain seasons, and the quiet assurance that guides your decisions. Ironically, this peaceful presence often caused others to miscalculate you. Because they evaluated strength according to the standards of competition and visibility, they overlooked the depth beneath your calm exterior. They assumed someone who did not participate in the world's drama must be unaware of its realities. In truth, your refusal to feed that chaos was the very reason you could see it clearly. Detachment from the noise allowed you to observe patterns that those immersed in the drama could not recognize. Chosen one, your youthful vibrancy is therefore not accidental. It is the natural result of a life that refused to become consumed by the emotional storms of the world. By stepping away from gossip, comparison, and the constant need to perform, you preserved a clarity that many people unknowingly surrendered. What others once misinterpreted as softness has become evidence of strength, a quiet testimony that peace can flourish even in environments filled with noise. Chosen one, one of the greatest mysteries surrounding your life has been the way you recover from wounds that would have permanently hardened many other hearts. People have watched moments in your journey that should have left visible damage. They saw betrayals that cut deeply, disappointments that disrupted plans, and seasons of pressure that might have broken someone who lacked spiritual grounding. In those moments, observers often assumed the outcome was predictable. They expected that pain would leave permanent marks, that your trust would disappear, and that your spirit would eventually become guarded and bitter, like so many others who walked through similar trials. Yet the story that unfolded in your life did not follow that pattern, and that difference confused those who believed pain always leaves the same scars. Every wound you encountered passed through a process that many people never learn. Instead of burying hurt beneath denial or allowing it to harden into resentment, you brought those experiences before God. You allowed yourself to feel the emotions honestly rather than pretending they did not exist. Yet you refused to build your identity around those emotions. That discipline changed the outcome of your suffering. Pain was acknowledged, but it was not allowed to become permanent residence in your spirit. Through prayer, reflection, and surrender, the wounds that once threatened to define your life were gradually transformed into lessons, wisdom, and deeper faith. Chosen one, this ability to process pain rather than store it became one of the most powerful forces preserving your spirit. Many individuals carry emotional injuries for years because they never learned how to release them. Each unresolved hurt becomes another layer of tension resting quietly beneath the surface of their life. Over time, those layers accumulate, shaping how they see people, how they respond to challenges, and how they interpret every new situation. The past becomes a lens through which they view the present, causing suspicion and defensiveness to grow stronger with each passing year. Yet your path unfolded differently because you refused to allow yesterday's wounds to control tomorrow's perspective. The healing you experienced was not automatic or effortless. There were moments when the temptation to remain angry felt justified. There were times when the memory of betrayal returned unexpectedly, stirring emotions you thought had already faded. Yet each time that happened, you faced a decision. You could allow the pain to reopen the wound and settle permanently in your heart, or you could place it again before God and release it. Over time, you chose the second path often enough that healing became a pattern rather than an exception. Scripture speaks of this renewal in Isaiah 40:31, where those who wait on the Lord are promised renewed strength. That renewal was not merely physical endurance. It was the restoration of a spirit that refused to be permanently defined by suffering. Chosen one, you felt every experience deeply because your heart was never meant to become numb. Sensitivity allowed you to understand both joy and sorrow with clarity. Yet sensitivity does not mean weakness. In your life, it became a channel through which healing could flow more quickly than bitterness. When pain arrived, you allowed it to pass through your spirit rather than remain trapped inside it. The result was emotional renewal that many people around you did not fully understand. They expected scars that would never fade, but instead they saw someone who returned stronger and calmer than before. This pattern confused those who once tried to harm you. When people act with malicious intent, they often expect to witness lasting damage in the person they targeted. They imagine the pain they caused will weaken your confidence, disrupt your peace, or alter your direction. Some individuals even watch quietly, waiting to see the moment when discouragement finally takes hold. Yet each time you encountered adversity, the outcome contradicted their expectations. Instead of becoming hardened, you emerged with greater clarity. Instead of retreating into resentment, you continued moving forward with renewed determination. Chosen one, this unexpected recovery unsettled those who misjudged you. They believed their actions would permanently change the course of your life. When they saw you rebuilding and progressing, it challenged the narrative they had created about your fragility. They began realizing that the strength sustaining you did not originate from personal pride or stubbornness. It came from a deeper place, from the spiritual resilience that forms when someone learns to bring every experience before God rather than carrying it alone. What appeared to outsiders as softness was actually resilience shaped through years of spiritual discipline. True resilience rarely looks dramatic or aggressive. Instead, it often appears quiet and steady, revealing itself through the ability to stand again after being pushed down. In your life, that resilience developed because each painful season became an opportunity for transformation rather than for bitterness. Romans 8:28 reminds believers that God works all things together for good for those who love Him. You may not have understood every situation when it happened, but over time, you began seeing how even the most difficult chapters contributed to your growth. Chosen one, what others interpreted as fragility was actually the opposite. Fragility collapses under pressure and remains broken. Your life demonstrated something entirely different: the capacity to rise again before others expected recovery to be possible. This ability surprised people who believed healing required many years, or who assumed that certain wounds never truly close. Yet the source of your restoration did not depend solely on time. It came from surrender, from the willingness to place each hurt before God and trust that He could transform what you could not fix alone. Because of this process, every challenge that was meant to weaken you eventually strengthened your character. Betrayal sharpened your discernment. Disappointment refined your patience. Pressure deepened your faith. By the time each storm passed, the person who emerged was wiser and steadier than the one who entered it. That transformation created the radiance others noticed in your presence. It was not the absence of hardship that produced that light. It was the evidence that hardship did not succeed in extinguishing it. Chosen one, this resilience continues to shape the path ahead of you. Your ability to heal quickly is not a coincidence, but a gift cultivated through years of choosing faith over bitterness. It protects your spirit from becoming trapped in the past and allows you to approach each new chapter with clarity rather than suspicion. The same strength that carried you through earlier trials will continue guiding you through future challenges. What your enemies once misunderstood has now become clear. They believed pain would permanently weaken you. Instead, each attempt to harm you revealed the resilience that God placed within your spirit. What looked fragile was actually unbreakable, and what appeared soft carried the quiet power to rise again long before anyone expected it. Chosen one of the most common misunderstandings people have had about you comes from the way kindness appears on the surface of your life. Because you carry warmth without harshness and compassion without cynicism, many individuals assumed your gentle presence meant you lacked awareness of the darker motives that sometimes operate in human relationships. They looked at your calm demeanor, your patient listening, and your willingness to treat others with dignity, and they concluded that someone so kind must also be easy to deceive. In their minds, kindness and discernment could not exist in the same person. They believed a warm spirit automatically meant a naive one. This assumption encouraged certain people to approach you with intentions that were not as honest as they appeared. Some arrived with carefully rehearsed charm, offering flattering words designed to gain your trust quickly. Others came with subtle manipulation, presenting themselves as allies while quietly observing what information they could gather or what advantage they could secure. These individuals believed your kindness was an invitation to test your boundaries. They imagined that a gentle spirit would lack the courage or clarity to recognize hidden agendas. In their calculations, you were someone who could be persuaded, misled, or quietly controlled. Chosen one. What those people failed to understand was that your kindness did not grow from ignorance. It grew from wisdom formed through experience. Earlier seasons of your life taught you lessons about human nature that many people only learn much later. You had already encountered moments where trust was misplaced and sincerity was not returned with the same honesty you offered. Those experiences did not turn you bitter, but they sharpened your awareness. Instead of closing your heart entirely, you allowed God to teach you how to remain kind while becoming more observant. Your compassion stayed intact, but your discernment deepened. This balance between kindness and discernment is rare, and because it is rare, it often confuses those who rely on manipulation. Manipulators expect one of two reactions when they interact with others: either immediate suspicion and hostility, or complete trust and openness. They know how to navigate both of those responses because they have practiced their strategies for years. Yet when they encounter someone who remains calm, polite, and attentive while quietly observing their behavior, their usual methods begin to lose effectiveness. That is the position you often place them in without even announcing it. While they believed you were accepting everything they said at face value, you were already studying the patterns beneath their words. Chosen one, over time you learn to read what many people ignore. Tone of voice, shifts in behavior, inconsistencies in stories, and the subtle tension behind certain smiles all began to reveal information that others overlooked. You noticed when someone's actions quietly contradicted their promises. You recognized when compliments felt less like appreciation and more like tools meant to influence your decisions. These observations were not the result of paranoia, but of spiritual discernment. Scripture reminds us in Matthew 10:16 to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, a balance that perfectly describes the posture you gradually developed. Because you continued treating people with courtesy, even while noticing their inconsistencies, many manipulators believed their strategy was working. They assumed your silence meant agreement, and your patience meant trust. Confident in their misjudgment, they often revealed more of their true intentions than they originally planned. In trying to secure influence or advantage, they eventually exposed patterns that made their motives impossible to ignore. By the time they realized you had been quietly observing all along, the illusion they hoped to maintain had already collapsed. Chosen one, this moment of realization often arrived too late for those who underestimated you. They expected to encounter someone easily swayed by charm or intimidated by pressure. Instead, they discovered a person who understood exactly what was happening but chose not to react impulsively. Your restraint gave them the opportunity to reveal themselves fully. What they believed was your vulnerability was actually your patience. Rather than confronting every inconsistency immediately, you allowed time and behavior to confirm what your spirit had already sensed. This patience reflects a deeper wisdom than many people recognize. When someone reacts quickly to every suspicious sign, manipulators can easily adjust their strategy. They deny accusations, redirect conversations, and present themselves as misunderstood. Yet when someone quietly observes and allows patterns to unfold, truth eventually becomes impossible to disguise. Proverbs 26:26 speaks of hidden hatred being revealed in the assembly, reminding us that deception eventually exposes itself when allowed to run its course. Chosen one, your calm discernment often created the conditions for that exposure. The individuals who attempted to misuse your trust frequently discovered something else as well. They realized that kindness, when grounded in wisdom, becomes far more powerful than aggression. Aggressive resistance invites confrontation and conflict, which manipulators often know how to navigate. Calm discernment, however, leaves them uncertain about how much you understand and how far their influence extends. They cannot easily provoke you into emotional reactions that might weaken your position. Instead, they face someone who remains composed while quietly maintaining boundaries. Chosen one, beneath your gentle exterior lies a depth of understanding shaped by both spiritual insight and lived experience. Your kindness is deliberate rather than automatic. You extend it because you choose to reflect the character of God, not because you are unaware of the complexities of human behavior. This distinction transforms your compassion into strength. You are able to treat people with dignity without surrendering your clarity about who they truly are. This wisdom also protects your peace. Because you recognize manipulation when it appears, you are no longer easily entangled in relationships built on hidden agendas. You can appreciate sincerity when it is genuine and step back when intentions become questionable. That balance allows your life to remain open without becoming vulnerable to every influence that crosses your path. Your kindness remains intact, but it is guided by discernment rather than by blind trust. Chosen one, the people who once misread your warmth eventually realize their mistake. They see that the same person they believed was naive has quietly maintained control of their own boundaries and direction. The gentle face they underestimated carries a mind capable of recognizing patterns and motives long before others notice them. By the time that realization arrives, the opportunity to manipulate you has already passed. Your kindness, therefore, is not weakness, but a reflection of spiritual maturity. It demonstrates that wisdom and compassion can coexist without diminishing one another. Those who once believed your softness made you easy to control eventually discover the truth. Beneath that calm presence is a level of discernment far stronger and far older than their assumptions ever allowed them to see. Chosen one, the vitality people often notice in your presence did not appear by accident, nor did it come from luck or natural temperament alone. It grew from a life that stayed continually aligned with God, drawing strength from a source deeper than anything the world could offer. While many individuals depend entirely on external circumstances for their sense of energy and joy, your life slowly became rooted in a different foundation. Through prayer, reflection, healing, restraint, and obedience, you cultivated a connection with God that renewed your spirit repeatedly, even during seasons when the world around you felt heavy or discouraging. That connection acted like a hidden well, supplying strength long after ordinary resources would have been exhausted. Over time, you learn that vitality is not simply the absence of struggle, but the presence of renewal. Many people assume youthfulness disappears as responsibilities and disappointments accumulate. They expect time to harden the heart and dull the spirit. Yet your experience revealed something different. Each time life introduced a challenge, you returned to the place where restoration begins, the quiet conversation between your soul and God. In prayer, you released tension before it could settle permanently in your mind. In reflection, you allowed yourself to understand lessons hidden inside each experience. In healing, you acknowledged wounds honestly so they could transform into wisdom rather than bitterness. Through restraint, you chose responses carefully instead of reacting impulsively to every emotion. And through obedience, you followed the direction God placed before you, even when that path required patience or sacrifice. Chosen one, these practices created a rhythm of continual renewal in your life. While others carried emotional burdens for years, you learned to release them before they became permanent weight. This process kept your spirit flexible and responsive, rather than rigid or exhausted. Scripture speaks about this renewal in 2 Corinthians 4:16, explaining that though the outward person may face weariness, the inner person is renewed day by day. That promise became visible in your life because you consistently returned to the source of that renewal. The world might measure vitality by external energy or appearance, but heaven measures it by the condition of the soul. Your spirit remained refreshed because it continually returned to God for restoration. Another part of this vitality came from the way you guarded your energy. You gradually learned that not every environment deserved your presence, and not every conversation deserved your attention. Earlier seasons of your life may have included relationships or habits that quietly drained your spirit. Over time, you began recognizing which influences nurtured your growth and which ones slowly depleted it. Instead of remaining attached to every connection out of obligation or fear of disappointing others, you started releasing what no longer aligned with the direction God was guiding you toward. This discipline protected the peace you had worked so hard to cultivate. Chosen one, guarding your energy did not mean closing your heart to the world. It meant recognizing that your spirit was entrusted to you as something sacred. Just as a garden must be protected from weeds that threaten its growth, your life required boundaries that preserved your clarity and strength. By letting go of toxic attachments and refusing to entertain endless drama, you created space for healthier influences to flourish. Your spirit remained light because it was no longer entangled in environments that constantly demanded emotional conflict or unnecessary explanation. You also learned to reject the empty validation that often dominates social spaces. Many people chase recognition as though approval from others can permanently confirm their worth. They measure their value through attention, praise, or comparison, believing that external affirmation will secure their identity. Yet you discovered that such validation rarely satisfies the soul. It fades quickly and demands constant renewal through new achievements or appearances. Instead of allowing your sense of worth to depend on that unstable system, you rooted your identity in something far more stable: the quiet assurance that comes from knowing you are aligned with God's purpose. Chosen one, this alignment kept you evolving instead of becoming spiritually stagnant. Some individuals grow rigid over time because they cling tightly to past versions of themselves. They resist change because adapting requires humility and reflection. Yet your life moved in a different direction because you remained willing to learn, grow, and adjust whenever God revealed a new lesson. Each season brought fresh understanding, and instead of resisting that transformation, you welcomed it. This openness prevented your spirit from becoming stale or hardened by routine. The result of this continual renewal was an ageless presence that people often noticed, but struggled to explain. When someone lives in constant conflict with themselves or their surroundings, tension gradually shapes their demeanor. Their expressions reflect the weight of unresolved frustration, and their energy becomes heavy with accumulated stress. Yet your life carried a different atmosphere. Because you returned regularly to God for restoration, your presence reflected calm rather than tension. The lightness people observed was not superficial charm, but the visible result of inner alignment. Chosen one, this quality both attracted and unsettled those around you. Individuals who felt exhausted by their own struggles often found your presence refreshing. They sensed a peace that felt genuine rather than forced. Yet others reacted differently, especially those who had allowed life's hardships to harden their hearts prematurely. For them, your vitality challenged assumptions they had accepted about the inevitability of bitterness. Seeing someone remain hopeful and balanced after facing difficulty forced them to confront the possibility that renewal was available to them as well. Because they did not fully understand the source of your strength, some people interpreted your youthful glow as naivety or privilege. They believed your calmness must come from avoiding the hardships they themselves endured. What they could not see were the countless moments when you returned quietly to God for healing and guidance. The peace they noticed in you was not the result of an easier life, but the fruit of a deeper connection with the one who restores what the world tries to wear down. Chosen one, in the end, the very quality that caused others to underestimate you became a testimony far greater than any argument you could have offered. Your youthful presence demonstrated that preservation is possible, even in a world filled with cruelty and pressure. It showed that the human spirit does not have to surrender to bitterness simply because suffering exists. Instead, it revealed that alignment with God can renew a person repeatedly, protecting their inner life from becoming defined by the darkness around them. Your vitality, therefore, stands as quiet evidence that divine preservation is real. It proves that peace can endure where chaos once tried to dominate. It shows that renewal can overcome the passage of time and the wounds inflicted by others. And it reminds those who observe your life that the strength flowing from God is deeper than any hardship the world can produce. Chosen one, the glow that once made others misjudge you is now a living testimony. It speaks of a life continually refreshed by faith, protected by discernment, and sustained by the presence of God. In that glow, the truth becomes clear. Divine alignment renews what the world tries to exhaust, and the spirit that stays connected to God carries a vitality that no cruelty, no disappointment, and no passing year can permanently erase.